Yeah, well, I don't consider 30 minutes debate to be adequate time. Again to the Premier. After months of heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story, the Premier still doesn't get that families are at a tipping point. They can't afford more of her hydro rate hikes. So why does the Premier insist on pushing ahead with a plan that even the nonpartisan Financial Accountability Officer says will end up costing Ontarians more on their hydro bills in the long run? More in their hydro bills. Why?
Mr. Speaker, you know, the cutting of the electricity bills across the province is part of a broader recognition, Mr. Speaker, that we're living in a very uncertain global economy. Ontario is doing very well, as both the Minister of Finance and the FAO have identified, Mr. Speaker. The economy is growing, but not everybody is sharing in that growth and that wealth evenly. And so cutting electricity bills, making sure that young people have access to post-secondary education, building childcare spaces, and, Mr. Speaker, raising the minimum wage, making sure that people have the resources that they need to look after themselves and their families. All of that is about building a fairer Ontario, Mr. Speaker, and I know that the member opposite understands that, and he knows exactly why we're taking these measures, Mr. Speaker.
Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Supplementary.
Again to the Premier. It's not just that she sold off Hydro One or that she's ramming her borrowing scheme through this House. The Premier is also using the power of her office to advertise that scheme to Ontarians by forcing utility companies to include her Liberal Party messaging in people's hydro bills. Will the Premier admit that she is just using these political inserts to save her own skin before the next election?
Thank you.
You know, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that has concerned me and has concerned us is that not everyone who's eligible for the Ontario Electricity Support Program, Mr. Speaker, actually have applied for it and know about it. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that people know about that program, Mr. Speaker, so that they can apply and they can get a 50% reduction, Mr. Speaker. And so we are making sure that that can happen. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I know that the member opposite knows that people in the province need relief. It's quite astonishing to me, Mr. Speaker, that I expect that he and his colleagues will be voting against that relief, Mr. Speaker. I think that you know, there's been enough discussion and they've talked to enough people, as we have, to know that people need relief. They need it now. And in fact, the member opposite brought forward a plan with his party that actually would not have given people relief, certainly not in the short term, Mr. Speaker, and maybe not ever. We're bringing relief to people. They're voting against it, Mr. Speaker. We know that people in the province need this relief right now.
Thank you, Speaker. Again to the Premier. And we are voting against soaring hydro bills. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. The Premier is focused on nothing but her own political fortunes this session. She's barreled ahead with a massively unpopular sell-off of Hydro One. She's allowed hydro rates to skyrocket. She's ramming through a $45 billion borrowing scheme that the FAO says will do nothing but drive hydro bills even higher. And she's forcing private companies to do some sneaky political maneuvering for her in their bills. Why does the Premier get that she can't win an election or improve her poll numbers by continuing to make decisions that sell out the people of this province?
Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Thank you. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased that it's this Premier and this government that's bringing forward a plan that's going to be reducing bills for people right across the province by 25%, Mr. Speaker. But let me quote Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day. The elimination of the delivery charge will assist our citizens by reducing energy poverty in our communities. It also represents recognition for the use of the land in the development and the expansion of the provincial energy grid. Today's commitment by the Ontario government is commendable and allows a path forward for the greater quality of life for First Nations in Ontario. That is what they are voting against, Mr. Speaker. Let me quote Ava Hill. Each one of our community members will benefit from Ontario's Fair Hydro Plan. This is a step towards reconciliation and recognition of our inherent rights as treaty holders. That is what they are voting against, Mr. Speaker.
Answer.
We are making a difference for every family in this province. That is what the opposition is voting against today, Mr. Speaker.